Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. Welcome to today's webinar on Skype Operations Framework and Network Readiness, delivering a cost-effective and reliable Skype for Business deployment. Today's featured speakers, I'm John Hand, and I'm from IR. I'm the Microsoft Global Alliance Director for our company to Microsoft, and I've been with IR now for 2 years, but I previously worked for Microsoft for 22 years. I'm going to let our other guests introduce themselves. Dave?
I'm Dave Bottomley. Like John, I'm a Microsoft alum of 11 years, and I'm a solution engineer with IR. Cornel?
Sure. Hi, I'm Cornel Bullens. I'm a senior customer engineering architect within our Skype Business product group. I'm not a Microsoft alumni yet, so I still work there, and I'm here today to talk about the Skype Operations Framework together with the network readiness assessments.
Thank you, Cornel. And so for those of you who've been joining our calls regularly, you're probably familiar with our company, but a quick overview. IR is a company that provides great user experience technology for users of unified communications services. And so we service Skype for Business, so that's what our call about is today. And we also service our legacy systems like Cisco and Avaya. We've been in business since 1988, so just a little over 28 years now. We're a global communications gold partner. We're also a sponsor of the National Users Group for Skype for Business, as well as global sponsorships in other parts of the world. We're certified for both monitoring and troubleshooting, and the product we're going to be talking about a little bit later today, our pre-assessment tool, we're in the process of being certified for. You can see some of our customers at the bottom. We also were awarded the Gartner Cool Vendor Award for 2016. That's based on our technology specifically around Skype for Business. We have over 13 million plus end users under management, and we're in more than 70. We have more than 70 developers, but we're in different parts of the world. So you can see from the map we have offices in the U.S. Our headquarters are based out of Sydney, Australia. We have offices in Europe and in Asia. So let's move forward. So what we're going to cover today is what's the Skype for Business framework, how to get started in it, the importance of network readiness, and then we'll have a brief demo of the assessor tool that IR is coming out with, and then we'll have time for Q&A. Okay. And so with that,
John?
just to kind of get a baseline, yeah?
I'm sorry to interrupt.
Hello?
This is Dave. I just have a few. Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes?
Yeah, there was just a few comments from the audience that a few participants are hearing echo, so I'm not sure if we have some kind of looping going on. Just a comment.
It's not on our end, so it may, I'm sorry about the sound issues. Dave, maybe you could get some live support. There's a live support question there. See if we can iron that out.
Sure.
But while we're waiting to get that resolved, let me run the first poll. Okay. So what we normally do in these calls, if you've been on our calls before, is we try and get just kind of a pulse of what's going on in the industry right now with our customers and our partners. And so for the first poll, which we just started, we have a couple questions for you. So what's your current UC environment? Do you have a Cisco system? Do you have an Avaya system? Do you have a mix? Or are you using Skype for Business Online? And I do want to point out that this is 100% anonymous, so feel free to vote as honestly as you want. We're just trying to get a baseline so when we have the rest of our conversation, we're aiming it towards the right audience. So we'll keep this open for about 30 more seconds, and then we'll move forward. So it looks like right now it's a little bit all over the map. Interestingly enough, about the largest bar right now is Skype for Business Online, which is good. Okay. We're getting the votes coming in. I appreciate it. And Let's give 10 more seconds for people to vote. So go ahead and just click the one that makes the most sense to you. And by the way, I should say a little bit of housekeeping. If you see a small window and you want to make it larger, in the lower right-hand corner of your screen, you should be able to make it full screen. And then when you exit the poll, you can go right back to the full screen. Okay. We've got some votes still coming in, so I'm going to leave it open for just a few more seconds. And then I'll stop the voting. Okay. Let's go with 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Okay. All right. Thank you for that. And we're going to go ahead and move forward. So with that, I'd like to turn things over to Cornel, who's going to take us through the network readiness part of the Skype Operations Framework. Cornel?
Awesome. Thank you so much. So I'm here today to talk about a little bit about Skype Operations Framework, and then we'll dive into network readiness, or at least Microsoft's vision on network readiness. And interestingly enough, how we co-share that vision together with IR. So let's see. I can work this tool. Awesome. So let's start off with what is the Skype Operations Framework. It's very important to us, and it's very important for us to bring this to the field, to bring this for everybody to use. It's basically our vision on an end-to-end implementation of Skype for Business. So it's not just the, hey, here's a TechNet page and go there and it'll show you where to click and what not to do. But it really is it's a framework that we've developed where we start off with, well, before you implement anything, this is all the planning you should do. And if you look at the planning phase that we have in our beautiful circle, you see that we have a piece that's envisioning and a piece that's assessing. For today, and I have a great arrow pointing to it in the next slide. For today, we'll talk about the assess phase of this, which, for instance, the network readiness is part of that. But we start off with planning, right? So we want to know what's there, what does everybody want, where do we want to go, how does you and your customers' vision for the future look like, and how does that fit with Skype for Business? How does Skype for Business fit into that vision as well? From there, we're going to deliver. And deliver is way more than just going into an online portal and clicking, hey, I've enabled these users. There are very important things in there, like enhancing your current capabilities. Perhaps you're already using Skype for Business, so how do you get the most out of the product? After all, you've paid for the product, so how do you get to use every single bit of that? But also adopt. Just because you have it and it's turned on doesn't mean it's actually, people are actually using it. So we really want to help you adopt a product within your company. And then a very big portion that a lot of customers have asked us about, and that in the past we haven't always been so clear about, is the operate portion. So now you've planned for it, it's working, but do you actually know if it's working? So in the operate portion, we're helping you to monitor your current environment, to get reports, to see what's working well, what isn't working well, where you need to provide some additional support to your end users, where you can do proactive reaching out, some of the additional enhancements you can do to make sure that the experience is great and remains great for your entire user base. So this is something that we call the Skype Operations Framework, and it really is an end-to-end framework. It's a life cycle that we've created and that we're developing content for. If we look at this Skype Operations Framework, the reason we've done this is that, we feel we must make sure that people are successful. And we've based this all on that cloud transition. So all of the assessment and planning and design portions and the operate portions, they're all looking towards the cloud, towards that transition to the cloud. And what we want to make sure is that that transition is successful. So what we've done is, instead of us creating really 500-page white papers. We're really going for these very practical approaches that can be quickly adopted by any customer and any partner in the world. This is primarily partner-facing, where partners can simply go to our website, download this for free, insert their partner logo, enhance where they can provide additional value on top of that Skype Operations Framework, and go with this to their customers. If there's feedback, go to skypeoperationsframework.com, tell us how we're doing a great or a poor job, give us suggestions, tell us what we can do better, and we'll make it better. It's as simple as that. So when we talk about network readiness, we're still in planning, we're in assessing. We have the strong belief that every customer in the world must do a network readiness assessment before doing anything with real-time communications. It's a firm belief, it's a requirement we have from our customers, and although we can't force people to do it, if I could, I would. You should always do a network readiness assessment. It's critical to the success of any real-time communication tool. So we've incorporated this in our assess phase. It must be performed before any implementation. And for us, it's a continuous process. Because once you start with this network readiness assessments, you keep running these network readiness assessments throughout your entire life cycle of your product. You start with it in assess, and you keep running this through deliver and operate to make sure that what you've measured and what you've designed for is actually what you'll be operating and delivering against. So that being said, we've talked about Skype Operations Framework. We've talked about the place of network readiness assessments within the Skype Operations Framework. So let's focus on the network readiness assessments themselves. So why do we want them? Yes.
Let me interject here because a customer asked a question, and it says the question just says Microsoft Skype for Business and Exchange on-prem, but I don't know how if that's supposed to be a question or a statement. So if you could rephrase the question, that'd be great. And I know that some people were having some audio issues. I don't know if that's been resolved yet, but on our side, everything is working properly. So just wanted to throw that out there. Go ahead, Cornel. Sorry to interrupt.
Awesome. Yeah, so love to take any technical questions. Feel free to do so. Happy to answer any technical questions around Skype for Business. Before joining the product group, I was a technical guy, so I can still answer those. So please rephrase, and happy to help. Anyway, so when it comes to network readiness, the reason we want to do them is we want to know where the risk areas are. If we know that we have areas where there's simply no way to do QoS, where the wireless is 15 years old, where there's 1 meg of bandwidth for 5,000 users, those are the areas that we need to know before we start implementing. Because once your user starts phoning in that the quality is absolutely horrible, it's simply too late. Getting people to fall in love with a product after it's failed is not a fun process. What we also want to do is to provide recommendations to people, to work with everybody that's managing the network, to tell them, hey, this is what you should expect when we start deploying Skype for Business. These are the things that will happen. This is the load that Skype for Business will put in your network. And it's going to be give and take. So maybe we shouldn't use certain modalities, or we should trim down on video, or perhaps we shouldn't use conferencing just yet, while we update the network, while we make changes to the network. We also want to prepare for operations. As we said, the network readiness assessment is a life cycle for us. When we start running this and people are using Skype for Business in a certain ways, let's say they use way more video than you anticipated, you can input that into the network readiness assessment, and from there you can rerun those, and you get different bandwidth calculations. You can put them against your network and update your network with those. So that's why we want to run them. Now, so those are the goals we want to do. So when we run them, so we manage risks, and what's very important, that the two things that I want to reiterate in this slide as well is that Skype for Business uses real-time communications. It's not like Exchange. In Exchange, if your email is 10 seconds late, no one's going to notice. In Skype for Business, if you get 1 second delay in your calls, everybody's going to notice. It's a very different beast compared to some of the existing products that we've got out there. Yes, people will be annoyed if their SharePoint page loads a little bit slower. If a conference is unusable because there's a delay of half a second to a second, that's going to be a way bigger problem. And it's not going to help the user adoption. It's not going to help the acceptance of a product that I think is fantastic. So with that being said, it also helps us to identify any potential issues. A lot of our customers, they're unaware that things like proxy servers or WAN optimizers will actually have a very large quality impact on Skype for Business, and there are certain configuration settings that need to happen. Those are the things we want to make sure that get highlighted in a network readiness assessment. Now, that being said, so what are the things we do in a network readiness assessment? So a network readiness assessment is basically a three-stage approach. So we'll start off with a kickoff and an inventory of let's say a data collection. We want to know, so first we want to tell the customer, hey, this is what we're going to do. This is when we're going to do it. This is why it's important. And after that, we also convey the amount of information we need. We want to know about the network. We want to know about the amount of users, all those nice things. We want to ask all that information before we actually start interacting. Because, so the joke I make at every customer is always like, well, at all the customers I've always been, everybody claims they have a full overview of the network just ready to go, ready to send off straight after the meeting, and then 2 weeks later, I actually get that email with the information because it turns out that that information that was readily available wasn't really available or was seriously outdated. And every customer laughs at me and they tell me, no, not with us, we've got the information. And then 2 weeks later, I actually get that information. So it's a thing that happens every single time. And when you're on premise and when you're there and you go into when you go onto a customer site and you go into a conversation and that's where you then need to wait 2 weeks for getting all that information. That's really not a good use of your time. I see that there are some questions from the audience that we should turn off the volume. I'm very sorry. It's not coming from my side. It's really, this is just me on a noise cancelling headphone. So I don't think it's.
Yeah, I wanted to also. Yeah, Cornel, I wanted to point that out too. We're all on noise canceling headsets, and so there should be no echo on our side. It may be unfortunate that some of the connections are causing echo. I would ask, like, if one or two audience members are hearing us without any echo, could you just put a comment in the feedback from the audience? And I'd appreciate that, because I want to make sure that, we're covering a lot of good information here, and I want to make sure that you can hear us as clearly as possible. So it's unfortunate that some of you are experiencing echo, but I can pretty much assure you it's not coming from our headsets.
Yeah, and
so
also
sorry about that.
Yes, and if you're not getting echo, please also let us know so that because I think that we will have certain people that have some echo issues and some people that won't.
I have a Skype session with someone who's attending, and they're saying they're not hearing echo, so I'm led to believe this is more of an individual than a systemic issue.
So I apologize for that. I have no solution for you, unfortunately. Perhaps there could be a recording available. I know we'll rerun this session again in a different time zone, and that might be something where we can retry without echo. Anyway, so
I was going to say the playback should not have the echo. So if you hear the playback, it'll be okay. Somebody just put in everything sounds fine to them. So okay, so we got at least 5 people saying that everything is good. Okay.
All right.
So
also, let's continue. So stage 2. So once we have all this cool information from the customer, we know where the users are, we know how many users they have, we have a little bit of an indication of their usage patterns. We actually we would normally go on site, and we would recommend that partners to do so as well. Go on site and have these conversations with your customers, where you're first of all you're basically validating the information they sent you. So now you're in the room with the entire team, and usually when it comes to filling forms, that's usually the networking and telephony team. So that's where you usually find out that some of the information might not be completely accurate. From there, you go into, you basically summarize the questionnaire with them. You provide a network overview, because we want to have an understanding of how does their network look like. Is it a star topology? Do they have all kinds of different separate entities that have their own internet connection? Are they sharing internet connections? Do they have multiple MPLS clouds? Things like that. Want to have a nice understanding of that. From there, we go into a persona and bandwidth calculation, where we educate the customer on, hey, how do you actually perform bandwidth calculations for Skype for Business? Because this is one of those things where we want the customer to keep doing these, to keep performing these bandwidth calculations, to make sure that when they change modalities, add users, change their network, they can still be ready and still be prepared for Skype for Business. We also talk through a lot of our recommended practices, like hey, how should you handle firewalls, and what should you do for your Wi-Fi, and what's a great thing to do for proxies. All of these things are part of the on-premises workshops, because it's awesome to send out an email to your customer saying, hey, you shouldn't do proxies, but when you're in a room with the entire team and you explain why they're a bad thing and how they can be used to do good instead of bad, that's something that'll stick. That's something where you now get this chance to educate the customer and to help the customer understand why we have certain recommendations, that they're not just something that we felt like putting on TechNet, that they are something that we've tried and tested. There's something optional you can do in stage 2 as well. It's traffic simulation. We have add-on tools for that. To be more precise, we have companies like IR that create an awesome tool to do things like that, and we'll have John show us something more about that later on. And then, which is an optional feature that you can do. And after that's done, you can go into a findings and recommendations portion, where you actually talk to the customer and tell them, hey, you know what, guys? These are all the things that we found during our conversations. And did we think that these things are going to be awesome? These things might be a risk, and if you don't change these things, you'll get in trouble. And let's talk about what our next step should be. How can we resolve these things? So those are the 3 stages of a network readiness assessment. So moving from there, one of the key things that we wanted to accomplish is making sure that not only could we teach anyone in the world to perform these network readiness assessments, we also wanted to make sure that they could be done quick and wouldn't get into the way of a project and would still be accessible to any customer in the world to run. Because when we come back to the first slide, we want every customer in the world to run this before implementing Skype for Business. So a typical timeline for this would be you do a kickoff workshop, you hand over the questionnaire. Within 2 weeks, you get a completed questionnaire. 3 weeks from then, you go on site, you do the on-site workshops, do the summary of the questionnaire, do the bandwidth calculations, network recommendations, start with traffic simulation if that's one of the things that you're doing. And then 4 weeks later, you're doing the closeout workshop containing those recommendations. So the actual effort is a week or less. And the timeline is usually 4 weeks, and it has everything to do simply with collecting the questionnaire. The customer has all that information available. This is an exercise you can do within the week. And for certain smaller customers or customers where you're actually managing the network, that's certainly something you would do within a week. We have 2 very distinct flavors of the network readiness assessments. We've got an essentials version, which is the one you can download for free. Go to skypeoperationsframework.com. We provide training for that and provide all those things. The materials are free, the training is free, everything there is for you to use. This is something we want every customer to run and to keep running these. They will provide insight into network requirements, they will help identify potential weak areas, and they're a mandatory part of every implementation. However, we will have customers that want site surveys for wireless, that will have issues with routers, and they will need someone to fix those issues. They will have, they might have spotted issues with their network using one of the add-on tools, and they want a deep dive analysis. So for those customers, they can move from the essentials. They can do a next step by doing an advanced version of this that actually provide those deep dives or fixes or equipment replacement. And for the next time they run this, they can go back to Essentials and see if everything's fine. And if everything's fine, they can just keep rerunning the Essentials versions. The nice thing about the Essentials, and we'll talk a little bit about that more, is that the add-ons that you can use for those, they will actually do traffic simulation for you. You can verify a quality deployment. So I think we'll go into the next poll, so I'll hand it over to you, John.
Thank you, Cornel. I really appreciate it. So now that you heard a little bit about, the Skype for Business framework, operations framework, let's have another poll here. And what we'd like to do is find out from you guys what your plans are for moving to the cloud. So I'm going to start the poll. And for those of you who don't know, there's a button on your screen that says Take the Poll. And so I had some feedback earlier that people couldn't find it. So I'm going to start the voting now, and you should see a button on your screen that allows you to take the poll. So we'll keep this open for a minute. And the options are, we will stay on-premise for the foreseeable future. We're looking to move some workloads to the cloud in a hybrid environment. We have a hybrid environment now. We have begun the process of moving completely to the cloud, or we are completely cloud-based now. So go ahead and take a few moments to submit your answers, and then we'll move forward to the next set of slides. And while we're doing that, if you have any particular questions, please feel free to put them in the questions section. So the people have started voting, and we're starting to get some results back. Right now, we're planning to stay on premises as the leader. And hybrid is coming up behind. So there's actually some people that are completely cloud-based now, which is interesting, and that's good. Now we've got some hybrid and people that are in a hybrid environment already. And okay, so we're getting some of the votes coming in. I'm going to hold off for a moment before we move forward. And again, I apologize for those who are receiving some audio issues. The only thing I can say is if you drop out and come back in, you probably correct some of that. But we've got at least 40 people that said they are listening just fine. So so it must be something in the network right now. But okay, we still got some votes coming in. I'll leave it open for 10 more seconds, and then we'll move forward. So 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, let's move forward. Okay. Cornel, back to you.
See, that's my cue. There we go. So the Network Readiness Essentials add-on. So by default, Network Readiness Essentials is a mostly paper-based exercise, and I really don't like the word paper-based exercise, because that really sounds like, oh, we'll just send out an email and you complete it and you're ready for Skype for Business, which it's absolutely not. There are really deep dive conversations you need to have with your customer. There are some very important points and educational things that you must do with your customer. It's a very interactive thing that you're doing, and by default, you wouldn't be testing the network doing physical tests to network. So I really discourage the use of the word paper-based exercise. It's a way of it really is a very interactive set of workshops that you perform with your customer. So the link that you see right here, that one is down at the moment. We're aware of that, and that one we're refreshing some of the pages, and that'll be up again tonight or tomorrow. One of the nice things that we have is sure.
Yeah, I also want to point out. Sorry, Cornel. At the very end of this presentation, we have an entire page of live links there where you can go to get additional information.
Yes.
And those will be live links when you download the slide deck. So hold tight. We have a whole screen full of them when we get to the end of the show.
Absolutely.
Here. Thanks.
So when it comes to the add-on, so we will have customers that simply don't know how that network performs. We will have customers that want to test this, and they want to, they will get this information once Skype for Business is deployed. We want customers to have this information before they start deploying. We don't want to find out that stuff's broken when you've just deployed the 15,000 seats. So one of the nice things that you can do is to run one of these add-ons. And IR has this beautiful add-on that you can run. And it's a tool that will help you validate against, and that's the nice thing. So we have a set of 5 very specific values that a customer must meet, measured from both the customer's edge as well as the customer's clients, that the customer must meet to ensure high-quality Skype business deployments. And when we talk about these add-on tools, they can help you test against these values, and they will immediately tell you if you need to take additional actions before you should deploy Skype for Business within your environment. And we'll show more about the tool. So John will demo it later on. And it's basically when you want to make sure that your network meets the quality standards, you should run one of the add-on tools. So that being said, we talked about this network readiness lifecycle, and there's the beautiful animation here. Worked really hard on that, so I'm happy that it works in BrightTalk. This really is when we talk about network readiness and network readiness assessments. We have a customer, they go in, they do a network readiness assessment. On the left, so you'll see. So you start on the left. So you do a network readiness essentials. Based on that, you'll always do network optimization, right? It'd be awesome if your network would be a network that is accidentally exactly the right network for Skype for Business, but in the end, you'll always find something that you can improve on or something that you didn't know. So you'll do some network optimization, and based on the amount of network optimization that you must do, or based on some of the possible issues or possible risk areas that you found, you could do an advanced network readiness assessment. Not all customers would need that. From there might be additional network optimization, and now there's a change. Perhaps there's an additional location, perhaps users are using different usage patterns, perhaps you've added users, perhaps you've upgraded routers. You rerun the essentials, and because you're familiar with it, you'll go through it rather quickly. So the customer or the partner with the customer would go through it themselves rather quickly, update the bandwidth calculator, verify if you're still meeting all the recommendations, see what else you can do to improve. You'd usually have some of the Skype Business data now. So you actually have the live data, so you know what's going on, and you can correlate that against bandwidth calculator and some of the tests that you've done. And you use that to do, and based on the outcome of that, you'll do additional network optimization, and you might or might not do an advanced again. And this is the way the circle would go round and round and round throughout the entire Skype business lifecycle. Now, what are some of the triggers for the advanced assessments? So perhaps you're uncertain on your correct QS implementation. Perhaps there are some known quality issues. Perhaps you need reconfiguration of on-site equipment. Perhaps you have no idea how your wireless will perform. Most customers actually have deployed data wireless networks, and data wireless networks are very different than UC-enabled wireless networks. So some of that uncertainty that's there, we have advanced network assessment partners, and they can help you do some of these advanced assessments and mitigate some of these concerns that there might be. So I think from here, that's all I can annoy you with tonight. And I think this is John's time to show you some of the cool UC Assessor stuff.
Thank you, Cornel. Took me a second to find my unmute button. But thank you for that. And what I want to talk about here is introducing our assessor tool. So this is a brand new product from IR, and it's actually still in the making process. And as of next week, it'll be in the certification lab. So we anticipate it being broadly available by mid-September. But what I'm going to show you today is a little bit about the tool called UC Assessor, specifically for measuring both essentials and advanced portions of the Microsoft offering. So the thing I want to point out here is it's a 100% software-based approach. So there's no probes that you need to put in, so you don't have to worry about the cost or the challenge of setting up probes in your network. It also can detect against the Skype for Business online edge points. So we have all of the Microsoft online edge points in the product, and you can test against that, and I'll show you that in just a minute in the demo. So the way it works is you have a monitoring server, and then you can set up the individual sites to test against the edge, and I'll show you the configuration here in just a moment. And then it's centralized management, so you can manage either from the client side or from the edge side, and it'll measure latency, packet loss, jitter, and some additional things like the burst mode of losing packets in a row. So we'll talk about that in just a second. And there's two flavors of this, as I mentioned. The one is Essentials, and one is the Advanced. So the Essentials will give, will detect the closest Skype for Business online point for you automatically. It'll also allow you to test the network performance for both your local sites and then each identified edge point. So you can test as a client or as a server. And then, as I mentioned before, it'll measure the latency, the packet loss, jitter, and all that good stuff. And it'll show you the problem points along the entire network path. Now, if you move from the Essentials to the Advanced, it'll give you the ability to analyze and troubleshoot the problem. So the Essentials will point out the problem, but the Advanced will give you some remediation issues and how to actually, in real English, fix the problems that you're encountering. So you'll have a comprehensive health report with specific details on how to fix the problems that you're having. It'll also give you some device-level root cause analysis that will give you some additional insight. And as I was thinking about this, as Cornel was talking earlier, I was thinking back to my experience last week watching the Olympics and my experience in high school. And the reason I bring this up is in high school, I was actually the silver medalist in the decathlon. Now, it's been a few years since I've done that. And so the point I'm making is that I would never go out and try and run it, to be the decathlon champion today without getting a health check. So it's the same thing with your network. You want to make sure before you put something very important on your network, including voice and video, that you want to make sure that you're healthy to begin with. And that's the whole process here. That's the whole spirit of what we're trying to achieve. So let me go ahead and show you this product. So give me one moment here. I'm going to share my screen. And you should be able to see my screen right now. So when you start with the Assessor tool, it's very, very basic. It's very simple UI. You install Prognosis on your server, and then you install the managed server. You can set up a managed server from here. I'm not going to go through that today because just for time's sake, I only want to show about 5 minutes worth of the demo here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you, down here we have some Prognosis servers already set up. So over here, what you have is you have the server sites. So we have site 1, site 2, site 3, and you can see we labeled them Sydney, Denver, and London. And I just want to point out that what you're going to see today is actually real live data. Okay, this is not fake information. And over here, you can configure it. So you can see over here, I can take my Sydney server and configure it on how I want it to work. So I can click on Configuration, and you can see here and the left-hand side, or in the sort of left of the center here, these are all the Microsoft edges. And what it has done automatically is showed me the round-trip time of the information coming from the edge servers. So you can see it's already selected by color coding the top 3 that would work most, best with our Sydney server. And here I'm testing from Sydney, our voice, video, and applications media. And over here I have a choice of codecs. Now the default is the Skype for Business online meeting codec, which is actually G.722 64K. And the reason that's the default is that's the most burdensome of all of the codecs. And so if you pass that test, you'll pass all the other ones. So depending on this codec that you want to use, but the default is this online meetings, and that's essentially the G.722 at 64K. I can also change the number of calls I want to test. One call will actually give me all the data I need, but if you really want to stress your system, you can go up to 250 calls. These are all enabled, and then if I change anything, I've just clicked update, but I haven't made any changes. So what I'm going to do here is now show you the results, or not the results, but the actual graph of what's happening. So you can see here, from our London server, we're testing against London. From our Denver server, we're testing against our Dallas edge. And from Sydney, we're testing against Singapore, Melbourne, and Sydney. And you can see that this is the application stream, video stream, and voice stream. Now, green is good, and you can see the latency in milliseconds on the line. And red is bad, and orange is somewhere in between. Okay? So all I have to do to see the details of these lines is if I want to drill in, for instance, I'll take the video feed from Denver to Dallas. And if you just noticed, it refreshed. It was just orange, and now it's green. And if I click here on the Denver to Dallas heading, I'll get a screen that shows me the data. Now, forgive me because we haven't signed off on all their certificates, but I'm going to go to the page anyway, even though it recommends not to. And in a second here, I'll refresh the page, and you'll actually be able to see the real data. Now, this is real live data, and you can see our latency, our burst rate, our packet loss, and our jitter statistics. And I can look at this by the hour, I can look at it by the day, and by the week. And the recommendation is to run this test against your system for at least 7 days to get a really holistic view of what's happening with not only your system, but how the call volumes map out across the week. So you can actually see that. And these are very high resolution pictures. And for the sake of the fact that I'm going over BrightTalk, let me see if I can. I will zoom in a little bit on some of these if I can. If you could see it zooming in. These are very high fidelity pictures. So if there's an area where there's a problem, you can actually see right there. And in the final product, we're going to actually add the ability to click on one of these bars, and then it'll go you directly to that spot in the network and show you what's happening. So let me go back to full screen here. And then I'm going to go back to my other chart. And also, let's take a really bad example here. So, and again, this is real data. So from our London to London's edge, we got 1,498 milliseconds. You can see that we sampled over 517,000 samples. So this has been running for a while. And if I want to see the longest hop between those 2 points, I would just go down here, click on the longest hop link, and that'll show me a picture of what's happening there.
So John?
Yes, sir?
This is Dave, and we do have a question from the audience which might be pertaining to what you're about to show here. And the question is, are we actually testing the WAN links bandwidth? So I think once you break down this diagram, that'll probably answer that question.
Yeah. So if you look at the overall diagram, and if you need more real estate, by the way, you can always close this section down, but I'm just going to leave it as is. You can actually see the London server here, and you can see the London edge here. So the Skype cloud's way over here. And you can see here's the longest path. It's got 1,498 milliseconds of latency. You can see here, this is the path within IR. And you can see we're pretty good here. And in fact, you can see that's all good, that's all good. And then we get the problem here when we enter the public network, okay? And you can see it's coming from ASR1, ION, GBLX.net. We have the biggest latency right here. There's another one coming from another public network server. Some of them share the information, some don't. Here's level 3 net. Oops. Let me go back a little more moment. This is all real-time stuff, so we're working without a net here. Here's another good one. Let me take this. Yes, sir.
While you're going through some
Dave?
of these stats, there's also a question about, yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead and answer the questions while I'm bringing this up. That's fine.
Yeah, no, the question really is, can you, it says, for integrity, is this referring to integrity as a security property? So could you basically expand on what we mean by integrity and the calculations?
So someone picked up on the integrity sign here. So see where it says integrity 0? What that integrity percentage is if you're testing this on a non-dedicated machine and other processes are taking place, like running a BrightTalk network seminar or webinar, that's going to impact the integrity of that, and that will change by percentage. So right now the integrity is at 47% because I'm actually using my laptop right now to present this webinar. So that integrity is just basically the integrity of the test itself. So if you're running this on a dedicated machine, the integrity will always be 100%. Good question. So here you can see some of the other statistics. You can see the latest latency. You can see the 90th percentile latency. Then there's also a trend, and then we'll also be able to show outliers. So there'll be times where you can actually see an outlier where the system may have looked good for 5 minutes, but during that 5 minutes there may have been a 19-second complete outage, and we'll be able to present that. So here again you have the view from Denver, and this is Denver to Dallas now. You can see the IR local. This is our internal system. We actually have some issues going on right here. So we need to find out why these routers are giving such bad results. And then we get to the public network. And then we get to the Microsoft cloud. And you can see here, that even on the Microsoft net, there's some pretty high latency at the moment. And this could be due to call volume. It could be due to a number of different factors. But if we had the advanced version, we could start finding out specifically what was happening there. And then you can get all this information, and you can view it in results. And the results are basically the report that Microsoft requests to be submitted. So when you're all done running your report, you can actually see, or when you're all done running your tests, you can see this report or the results. And if you choose to, you can actually export this. Yes, sir.
I know you already moved on to the result view, but there were.
Yeah,
back on the other. No, it's easy. On the other screen here, there was a few questions. So someone asked, I'm assuming SNMP is required, and that simply cannot be because there's a number of hops that are in the public domain. So we're actually using essentially ICMP routing of those packets. So it is round trip. It's essentially ICMP test through the hops. So those are the mechanisms. I think as John tried to articulate, we have the ability to essentially define the edge of the internal network. So this would be the corporate site that you're testing from. Then there's a segment that is public, and then there's a segment of which, in this context, Microsoft is responsible for. And you'll see if John drills into some of those hop diagrams, you'll see where MSN.net comes into play. So, John, I don't know if you want to just kind of revisit that and maybe give folks a moment to digest like those three segments.
No. We're having some.
The demo gods playing
with you today.
When you
deal with live. That's what happens when you're dealing with live data. Okay, let me go back here. Let me just pick one. Let's just pick one from here.
You probably still have one up, maybe.
Yeah, I probably do. Let's see. Yeah, let's just do this one. Okay. So this is our London to London view of the app server.
There's also a question asking if this is real time, and this test is continually going. For instance, I believe the statistics are we're basically pushing 50 packets a second ongoing. So this is a near real-time view of the data and the statistics. As you can see in John's earlier views, the data was basically changing state, if you will, from green to orange to red and so forth.
Yeah. So here you can see the integrity is back up to 100% because some of the processes that were running on my computer have stopped in the background. So so now we're at, you know, the trend is at 98% for the duration of this presentation. So what I did here is I reduced the menu screen on the left-hand side. So when this refreshes, it'll actually refresh edge to edge, so you can see a larger view of it. But it refreshes on a periodic basis of about every 30 seconds. And so here we have, you know, again, as we talked about, going to refresh. Let's go back. All right. So I think I've covered all of the things. I can go back and we can answer any questions that you have about that. But again, the bottom line is you want to get to the results page that you can share out with Microsoft. And this is the actual report. And as I mentioned before, you can just export it to you can just simply export it to Excel by clicking one button, and then you can save it or open it. You can do all kinds of analytics once you have it in Excel. So there's the Excel report that you can submit. Where's my Excel? Here it is right here. So there it is. All right. So now, can this be measured in real time? Yes, it is real time. And yeah, so let's go back to the slides. And again, if you have more questions, feel free to put them in. One thing I do want to point out is that we do have an annual summit. And this year, before we do the summit, before we talk about the summit, let's take our final poll here. So now that you had a chance to hear about Essentials or Advanced, and as I mentioned before, Advanced will take everything that you've seen here and build on top of it with remediation. Which assessments are you considering for your environment? So let's open up the last poll for the audience here, and we'll spend a minute taking these answers. So the first question is, all we need are Essentials for now. We'll likely start with Essentials, and if we see an issue, move forward to Advanced. We'll likely start with Advanced because we want to know how to fix issues if we have them. We're looking for a service provider to monitor our environment, or we've deployed already but need assistance to optimize our performance. So those are our choices. So we'll take about a minute here. So go ahead and vote. Again, these are fully anonymous, so feel free to speak your mind on this, and we'll see how we go. So I don't see. Oh, here. So votes are starting to come in now. So right now, Essentials is winning. Yeah, and yeah, for those of you who don't know where the poll is, there should be a button on your screen that says "Take the Poll." Unfortunately, I've never attended one of these as an audience member, so I don't see the audience experience. But I know there's a button to take the poll, and then there's a button to go back to the presentation. So the votes are starting to come in right now, so I'm going to leave it open for about another 30 seconds or so. So while we're doing that, if you have more questions, feel free to type them in. And I'm going to start by asking you to please review this session when we're done, because it's the only way we can make these better. And to have your comments and feedback. I know there were some audio issues, but don't grade us on that because that's out of our control. We've had some people give us bad ratings just because they couldn't hear the things and it was actually on their end, and so it brings down the overall rating. But what we want to do is make sure that we're presenting the right level of content for you, so that these are more valuable. And again, we do these monthly. We generally do them the third week of the month on a Thursday. So I'll talk about our next webinar here. And in fact, the next webinar is going to focus specifically on the differences between the Essentials that you just saw and some of the advanced. So we'll be able to show the advanced features in our next webinar. Okay, so I'm going to stop the voting now. It looks like about 33% of you said that you're going to start with advanced, which is interesting. Okay, so I'm going to stop voting, and then I started to mention this before, but we have a summit that we do every year. And in the past, we've only made this available to our current customers. But this year, we've decided to open it up to our partners and people that are considering moving to our product, which is called Prognosis. It's called the IR Prognosis Summit. It's actually taking place this year in Denver, which is our U.S. headquarters. It's going to be in October, the 20th through the 21st. And it's very reasonable. The summit includes hotel and meals, and I know that I think the price right now is at $495, but it's going up to $795 by the end of this month. So if it's something that you would consider going to, there's a link here, and you can either email Carrie Filkins, who's the administrator for this particular event, or just go up to our website and register online. Okay. So if you go there, we hope to see you there. And so now we have a dedicated few minutes here for Q&A. But as I mentioned earlier, one of those links that weren't working, this page here has a plethora of good information for you, including the link to the Operations Framework overview. Also, Microsoft would like you to provide feedback for the Skype Operations Framework, so there's a link there to provide your feedback. There's also an amazing set of online webinars that Microsoft is putting out together, which I've had a chance to see some of them, and they're incredibly high quality. That's the Operations Framework Academy online videos. I would highly encourage everyone interested in setting up their Skype for Business framework or system to go there and spend some time on that website. There's a ton of good information there. There's also what's called the Rollout and Adoption Success Kit, or RASK, and that's a little bit dated because mostly it talks about Link, but everything that it talks about Link is applicable to Skype for Business. So if you open it up and do a search and replace for the word Link for Skype for Business, it's a perfectly good tool, and it helps you from a planning perspective. So there's a lot of great information out there free of charge directly from the Microsoft website. So any questions? It looks like some more questions are coming in. Is server required on-premise for each location? As in, I have 20 satellites, so I need 20 servers. Dave, you want to answer that one? I think I'm certain that the answer is no.
Well, it really depends on, it's architected more towards where the edge is or client. So in the client case, the current implementation, you'd want to put it wherever your clients are basically going to drive the traffic from their location to the edge. That's the whole purpose of the solution. So I'm not saying that in future revs we may have a different type of approach, but typically that's the usage. Is we take essentially the solution out locally, as in what John demonstrated. We do have machines in Denver, Sydney, and I believe might have been London. I don't recall, but we would put it out to wherever we want to drive the traffic from, and that may be edge or it may be where client is.
Yeah, good point. And I'm just going to share my screen one more time because I forgot to point that out. But to the point that you're making, over here where it says server identity, our location name is Denver. And if I click here to see the server identity, you can put some additional information out here, but you can see location type in this case as a client, but I could also be testing it on the edge. So if I wanted to put a server out there on the edge to test the edge point, I could do that as well. Okay? Good question. Sorry for not pointing that out. Another question came in that says, is there any, will the session be recorded? The answer is yes, and it will be accessible. You'll see that at the last slide. There is one of the nice audience members said there's no button like poll, but there's a different tab for the voting. So thank you for that. Is there any info on setting up a 911 on any of the tools? So 911, like an emergency call. That's actually maybe Cornel could talk about that. I know they're adding 911 to Skype for Business, but Cornel?
Yeah, so that's an entirely different conversation. And since we're on top of the
Yeah.
hour, so the good news is that is pretty much separate from a network readiness assessment. So I suppose that's the good news. And the other good news is that we actually have recommendations around that you can find on skypeoperationsframework.com.
Okay, so as Cornel pointed out, we are on the top of the hour, so I need to go before they close us down here. Our next webinar is going to be September 22nd. As I mentioned before, it's going to be Essentials versus Advanced. We also have additional information if you want to learn more about our other product, which are so we go from Essentials to Advanced to the full-blown product, which is called UC Prognosis. You can find out more about it here. If you have any particular questions that you didn't get answered, all of our email aliases are here. You can email us directly. This deck will be available for download, as well as the recording will be available. And lastly, let's move forward. We just want to thank you for your time today. Okay. Yeah, I'm assuming you tie into the Skype Business Monitoring server. Does your solution require a SQL as well? It uses SQL in the back end for a database, but we also have our own database, and we can answer that offline. So we are at the end of the hour. Thank you again for your time. Really appreciate you taking the time to spend with us today for an hour. I know that time is our most valuable commodity, and we really do appreciate you spending the time with us. Please, I encourage you to just go up and provide some feedback from the audience. You can just rate or review it and or provide some comments. And with that, enjoy the rest of your day.